Welcome, everybody. My name is Christine Lawzakat. I'm Chair at Advance. I've been trustee since 2013, so this is my 10th year with the organisation. So that makes me, nearly half the time. Where does it go? For those Twitteratis amongst you and social media wonderful people, please do tweet away and post on social media. There's a hashtag for the event. It's hashtag Advance 25 years, as in 25 years. That would be wonderful. Thank you so much. It's so wonderful to have such a full room, and it's really exciting to have so many people here that have been so important to our history and to us being here in our 25th anniversary year, which is fantastic. I wanted just to do a quick introduction. There's lots to get through today, so I just wanted to remind everybody why we're here. Why we're here. Why do we all exist? Violence and abuse of women and girls, including domestic abuse, affects 1 in 3 women globally. That is 1.3 billion women. That's a lot of women. And it's an epidemic. And it's the silent epidemic that people don't really talk about and should talk about way beyond this room. So do social media, tweet away. Domestic abuse and violence against women and girls are not inevitable. We can end violence so that women and girls can lead safe, just, and equal lives. The COVID pandemic brought unprecedented challenges to actually all of us in this room, and particularly to women and children. The cost of living crisis has exacerbated this. We know that women and children struggle disproportionately with the effects on their safety, their mental health, their well-being, their housing, and their income. So what do we set out to do at Advance, and what is our contribution to these challenges? 50 years ago, women came together to respond to the domestic violence and abuse affecting women in their own relationships and families. 25 years ago, a very special group of women, supported with some male allies, came together to respond to ending domestic abuse in a coordinated community response with partners throughout the system, many of whom are also here tonight. And it's so wonderful to meet you all in person. Advance started in 1998 as an innovative local response in Hammersmith and Fulham. Today, we reach out and provide support to over 9,500 women and children every year. We do this because of our incredible, dedicated, passionate staff, both working staff and volunteers. Not that our volunteers aren't working, actually they work pretty hard, so thank you, who always go above and beyond. We do this because of our committed supporters, many of whom are also in this room tonight, from statutory commissioners to trusts, foundations, corporates, companies, individuals, enabling us to provide our vital services to so many. We do this with our many partners across the women's sector with specialisms and expertise that is rooted in decades of experience, expertise, and commitment to end violence against women and girls. Again, many of you are here, and we say thank you on behalf of all of us for all your hard work and for your dedication and for your tireless fight your tireless fight for women and girls. It's very special. Tonight, as we mark 25 years of Advance, we look forward to the future. We look forward to 2026. You'll hear from 2 of the women who were there right at the start, and without whom we wouldn't be here tonight. We wouldn't exist. Beryl and Bear. You will hear from 2 women who have inspired us and the women we support through their creativity to tell the stories of survivors, Shareefa and Amja, one of whom was supported by Advance herself. Our CEO, Nikki, will share with you what we see the next 3 years being at Advance, our strategy towards our vision and our mission. And we've got friends and allies in academia, in the legal profession, and 2 leaders led by and for women's organisations, joining our Director of Services to share their reflections on how we ensure the safety and justice for women and girls. We invite you to join the discussion. It's a small room, it's a full room, but do feel free. There is a Q&A that you can participate in. Please join the conversation online. But let's start by welcoming, please, to the stage, the founders of Advance, Bear and Beryl. Perfect. I'll sit between you. That's even better. I've got control of the mic. But unfortunately, I have to hand it over. So, welcome, and thank you very much for being here tonight. It must be quite exciting for you to see the fruits of your labour after 25 years. You both started working in the movement to end domestic abuse in the early 1970s. No reflection on your age, but a reflection on your passion and dedication and commitment. You were involved with the founding of Women's Aid Hammersmith and one of London's first refuges in Hammersmith. What drove you to work with women affected by domestic abuse, and why Hammersmith?
I was, do you want me to hold the mic? No, I can hold it. Oh, jolly good. I was rehoused in Hammersmith in 1975, and the great energy that was in the women's movement was in Hammersmith Women's Aid, which was about to open their first refuge. But there were other factors in that borough that helped to keep Hammersmith at the forefront of a lot of the developments for the next 30, maybe 40 years. There was a political will at the town hall, which of course was essential. There were clear funding streams. The council had an impressive women's committee. They were the ones that commissioned the first local research into what support, it was called, into what was available for women experiencing domestic violence. And Liz Kelly's recommendations in that report gave a framework, really, which council community officers could work to. And one of the first recommendations was to form a domestic violence forum, and I think that was the first in the country. And it was fully serviced from the town hall, which of course is crucial. There were two exceptional council officers, Robin Holder and Debbie Seaburn, who followed her, and they developed the first partnership with the police. They coaxed the police to share data, and they lured some of us out of Women's Aid, where we had really operated and felt part of a national feminist network and organisation, and had not really related as a local organisation before.
Did you want to add anything to that?
Just to say, at the time we were running a drop-in service with the police, and it was the first drop-in service for women who were going through domestic violence and still living with it. And we realised that we could only give advice on the day, and then someone, came back or never came back, and we needed a service that was going to address all of their needs and not just on a drop-in service.
Was that the reason you set up Advance in 1998 and launched the coordinated community response? Was that one of the drivers?
Yes. We had become aware of the very high numbers of police call-outs. Through sharing data, we knew and could see how the criminal justice system was failing survivors. Robin discovered the Duluth project in Minnesota in America, and she brought Ellen Pence over, and the council paid for it, for a whole week of training in the Irish Centre. And a lot of people who are still involved in the sector today were at that training. And it was hugely influential on Bear and I, and on many, many others. So we set out to implement a coordinated response. And our version of it was to run from the point of a 9-9 call through to the disposal in court. So it was very focused and very specific. And we all had to rethink what we were doing in the light of the Duluth approach. And I mean all, and that included the voluntary sector. We also consulted with survivors because we were about to work very closely with the police. But it was clear that when a woman is in high danger, there is no one else to call. So it was therefore essential that what she got was a very good response, and especially that she should get it on the first occasion. There was we did tracking exercises, tracking where offenders might drop out of the system, tracking where their victims might drop out of the system, and it was clear very quickly that there was no agency working with women who were living with violence. You had to leave your home in the main to get support. So Advance was really set up to meet that gap in service.
Wow. You also developed a model for domestic abuse advocates that led to the development of the IDVA in 2005. What did the DA advocate offer women that they didn't have?
lots of things really. The one thing I wanted was the ethos of Advance was to treat women who came, survivors who came, with kindness, to be polite, to address all their needs, no matter how they presented or who they were, because lots of agencies, refuges wouldn't take women who had maybe mental health issues or drug issues, and we wanted to accept people no matter what their issues were or what their needs were. And also, I wanted to professionalise advocacy, because working with refugees, there were a lot of mistrust between agencies and refuge workers, between police, social services and refuge workers. And I wanted to professionalise the advocates so they knew their stuff really well, to train them in housing and welfare and law, so they knew the systems. And that's what part of the community response was. It was understanding the systems, so you could then explain to women the systems and why, maybe he wasn't charged, or why the housing was difficult to get, but also for us it was about Advance stands for, the CE stands for community education, and we wanted to educate the agencies why women were scared to go to court, why women couldn't get an injunction, why they were still living with domestic violence. And it wasn't because they were being difficult, it was because the circumstances they were in. So a big part of it was training the police, training the judges, training all of the agencies that the woman came into contact with, because she didn't just come into contact with us, she needed advice from all kinds of services. And we also wanted that if a woman went to any agency, that agency could give her a good first response and give her immediate help then, and she didn't have to wait to be referred to the advocacy project.
And then you took that work further, didn't you? Because you were instrumental in setting up the UK's first special domestic abuse court.
Yes, and just to say a little bit more about Advance, because we were asking the criminal justice agencies to be proactive, and that would not necessarily make women safer. We held, as a partnership, we held safety as the overriding concern. So what made those interventions safe was the immediate referral to a new specialist service that was designed to work alongside them. Women's Aid was still there as the safety net for women who are ready to leave home, and it always will be, and it will always be needed. But this was a new service. It was new, and possibly still is, that Advance gave unconditional support. The woman did not have to leave home, she didn't have to stop drinking or give up drugs or leave her older children at home, or any of those conditions that agencies were putting up barriers maybe without fully realising they were. And Advance were not. They would take her from the point at which she was and work on from there. But your question is about how was the partnership formed. It really had to develop with mutual respect, and respect, as we know, has to be earned. But it was getting to understand each other's roles and powers and limitations. Getting to know getting the right people at the right level in one room, and thrashing out protocols face to face, protocols that would work at an operational level, not some agreement that's up here at very senior level, though it would have to be signed off at senior level. Agreeing definitions and not fudging them. Holding overarching aims which all the agencies could subscribe to. The agencies being the criminal justice agencies and the relevant voluntary sector agencies in the main. And we had added the A&E department at the local hospital. Understanding what a good target was, based on data, and then using that data to see how you're doing on a regular basis, monitoring, reviewing, holding each other to account, and seeing where things were going right or wrong, or where there might be unintended consequences. And not starting with the money question. It's not all about money. I mean, the main message is if you do it better and sooner, you'll do less of it. And training existing paid staff, the big statutories have huge numbers of staff, they are a big resource. and could be better used in most cases. Training them to do something slightly differently with a Duluth perspective. Addressing what the benefits might be to each agency, because nobody goes to work wanting to do a bad job. There are benefits for the agencies in doing it, and addressing those and learning what their barriers were to doing better or differently. From their point of view, not from what we imagine their point of view is. The ex-Chief Superintendent, Anthony Wills, is here today, and he led the entire Hammersmith division into regular training, the entire division, civilians as well. And he would say, rightly, if you get it right for domestic violence, you'll be getting it right for everything else. You know, this wasn't, we weren't asking them, the criminal justice agencies particularly, very hung up on, we're national, we can't do anything different in Hammersmith, we have to be the same to everybody. And we're saying, we don't want you to do it differently, we just want you to do it well. Be your best self.
Wonderful. Just in the interest of time, we're going to move on and just talk briefly about the special domestic abuse courts.
For us, the domestic violence court was really important because advocates were there in court. They would get up on their hind legs and say, you know, if they attended all the hearings before the trial as well. So they would say if there was bail conditions that were unsafe, if there was information to be given to the CPS. And we had something, we invented something called the Mars Bar bail conditions, where she worked, rest and played, because sometimes they'd give bail conditions that said, you know, it was just covered her home, but the bail conditions or an injunction if we went to civil court needed to cover everywhere she went. So, and we made sure we told the woman the information. She was given copies, you know, not just one copy, 4 copies, so she could put them at the school, with her friends, her mums, you know. So we worked with what the women were telling us and what was needed, but also crucially was we could give the courts the information that she told us that maybe they might not know, that there was an incident that night and, that something had happened straight away. So the court could, work with that hopefully and give proper bail conditions. But also it made the woman feel more in control because you told her straight away what was happening and what the court had decided, so she could, think about her own safety planning. So, that was very good. And building relationships with those policemen, policewomen, and with the court, it made it that we weren't them out there. We were all working together on a common aim.
We would have met with those agencies prior to a trial always. But the coming about of the court was partly down to Leeds. Leeds had the first domestic violence court, but they didn't hear trials. So West London Magistrates Court was the first one to hear trials as well as hearings. By the time we got to forming that, the police were sharing their CRIS reports with us, and we had a shared data system. So we could see very clearly where the fallout was in that triangle, that attrition triangle, which we sort of invented by accident. But it does speak to people, that attrition triangle. If you start with the likely incidents and you end up with the number of convictions. The court themselves didn't know the numbers of cases that they had, so we had to start by flagging, and that was very practically done by the police in the police station, putting a green sticker on each paper file. Those times, of course, have changed. But without that flagging, you couldn't schedule a court. So all the flagged files went into, it isn't a special building or anything, obviously, it's 1 day, 1 week in the magistrates' court. And we would have trained all the agencies there, including the magistrates, another first. And later on, Peter would even train Crown Court judges, which was always her aim. And all the agencies, as Beryl says, were actively involved. They were not there to observe. They were there because they had a job to do to make that hearing the best possible. Especially the advance advocates, who they're the ones with the up-to-the-minute information about the victim. They would also approach victims on the day if they had been turning down referral up till that point. So they would, might be their last opportunity to have an appointment.
Lovely, thank you. I'm going to move on. I'm going to move you on. You did say chair hard. I'm chairing because we're running, we're running a bit behind. In fact, I'm going to move on to just really asking you what your reflections are on the progress we've made to end domestic abuse 25 years on, well, 50 years on, against violence. And what would you say is the key one thing you would advise those working with survivors to do?
To listen to them. You know, survivors will tell you what they need, and they'll tell you what the next issue is to focus on. If you listen carefully to them, I've learned everything I know about working in domestic violence from survivors and from, you know, listening to what they're bringing. And, you know, if 10 survivors are saying the same thing to you, there's an issue, and you need to address it. And also be kind to yourself as a worker. And tea breaks are very, very important. I know my advocates have always laughed, but, you know, when you're stressed, make tea. Always offer tea to a survivor. Always offer tea to a visitor. It's a really good thing just to stop and take care of yourself.
And be proud of the history, you know, and draw on it. And hold on to for me, the essentials to hold on to are agency accountability and data. The data speaks to you. They'll show you what's happening, you know. Because some things don't change. They really don't. What is the need? How are you going to meet the need? How do you know there's a need? And how will you know you've met it? I mean, those 4 questions don't change, you know. And it's from women that you will learn what the need is. But keep a right-spaced approach to achieve changes, because what you need to be doing is changing the many systems which survivors have to negotiate. And that can only be done, in my view, with a right-spaced approach. And keep talking. Coordination is a face-to-face activity. And keep listening. And listening to what they say, because those survivors are the reality check in how those systems really are working.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much. Thank you. So I love the do it better, do it sooner, so you can do less of it. That's a good one. We will take that. Thank you very much. Now we're going to move on to introducing the first of our 2 wonderful creatives in the room, Amja Unabashedly. Such a great name. Amja is an artist, painter, and poet, and domestic abuse advocate. She's helped with us at Advance. She's run workshops with our survivors. She's awesome. And I have no idea what she's doing, so it's going to be a wonderful surprise for me as well. So welcome on, and come on in, and come on up.
Okay, I'm going to have to put on my reading glasses because, as you know, we get a bit older. Just bear with me a couple of moments and I'll put them on. It's my little gadget here. Okay, so thank you everybody for being here today. My name is Amja and I'm the founder and creative director of Amja Unabashedly, a creative hub where love, art and inspiration empower and whose inception was inspired by support from Advance Charity. Before I continue, I'd like to clarify something. Some of you here may know me as Antonia. Others will know me by the name of Amja, which is an acronym for the names my mother gave me, in the order they were given, which appear on my birth certificate, and is the name I creatively gave myself as a reclaiming when my identity was stolen by coercive control. I share this because I believe surviving to thriving is the art of conscious awareness, which is a concept I developed when I was in the process of cleansing my mind of limiting beliefs, a cleansing which was afforded to me because of the support I received as a service user at Advance Charity between 2018 and 2019. And as such, I'd like to give a massive thank you to Beryl and Beryl for the vision in 1998. to work closely with the police, the criminal justice agencies, A&E, housing, and advocating for criminal justice for women who had experienced domestic abuse, while also simultaneously providing a safe, comfortable community space for survivors to talk about abuse. For many of us in the room, we are aware today marks the beginning of Stalking Awareness Week. And as we've heard, today is the 25-year anniversary of Advance. Having access to trauma-informed support can be the potentiality for a survivor to envision a safe life beyond surviving a crisis. I stand here, as you were probably walking around in the room there are two art pieces, and they are very important art pieces, as they exemplify how a fusion of criminal justice strategies, mental health support, and creative workshops can be the catalyst for a survivor to navigate domestic abuse and/or the criminal justice system and ultimately live beyond surviving. The first is my art piece Perception, which is the one that was on the left-hand side. It is a lot bigger. It's a lot bigger piece. It's a lot bigger piece, and it was created in Advance in 2018 for the See Her project, Healing Through Creativity, which was facilitated by Rachel Gadsden, a visual and performance artist who encouraged myself and other service users to shut our mouths with intention and let the canvas tell the story when our truth was being consumed by gaslighting and semantics. Perception tells the story of my vulnerability, my pain, truth, survival, growth, audacity, courage, and how creative expression manifested into a healing and a rebirth out of domestic abuse. The second is my art piece, A Heart to Hold, which was actually inspired by a therapy session at Women's Trust charity when I was encouraged to have self-compassion, which can be difficult when your children have been taken and mum guilt becomes your inner compass. I also thank the Angelou Partnership's coordinated communities response, particularly between Advance, Hestia, and Women's Trust, because it is through their collective working I receive support with my mental health. You will note that part of the beautiful woman that you saw on the art piece, her hands and her head are outside of the canvas. And this is to highlight that self-love is the precursor to your greatest love, and how learning to hold our hearts with care again is how we grow beyond the boxes of oppression, which can be the everyday place for targets of abuse and those in correctional facilities. So to the women and girls here today, hey sister girl, hey sister friend, I know you feel like your pain won't end. You've been trying to fly wherever you go, but underneath it all is a story that's not being told. High functioning and domestically abused, a domestic violence perspective that is rarely seen on the news. You be looking oh so fly wherever you go, but underneath it all is a story that needs to be told. She could be your mother or your grandma too, or that nice lady at the bank that's always smiling when she greets you. She could even be your child's teacher, or even the daughter of the preacher. She's all fine in that billionaires club, or one of our sisters on her knees daily having to scrub. She could be the CEO getting her stuff done, but at the end of the day, all she ever feels is numb. But I'm here to tell you that she can get through, because everything she needs already resides in you. So the next time you hear your intuition speak to you, listen keenly, because it's your ancestors trying to reach you, saying, I'm gonna see my sister fly, 'cause I'm gonna help my sister to rise. I'm gonna see my sister fly, 'cause I'm gonna help my sister to rise. Now, your sister may not look like you. She may not even look like me. But we, our sisters, are united in the truth to our stories. So let's do as our ancestors have been trying to teach us, and put out your hand so your sister can reach you and say, I'm gonna see my sister fly, 'cause I'm gonna help my sister to rise. I'm gonna see my sister fly, 'cause I'm gonna help my sister to rise. When you look in the mirror, I want you to see that no matter what they say, no matter what they do, You are still the beauty in your ancestors' wildest dreams. So let's make our ancestors oh so proud and come together and say it out loud. I'm gonna see my sister fly, 'cause I'm gonna help my sister to rise. I'm gonna see my sister fly, 'cause I'm gonna help my sister to rise. High functioning and no longer abused. This is why we march, this is why we stand, and this is why we talk, so that we can switch up that narrative in the news. And yes, we are going to fly wherever we go, because now the truth to our stories are starting to be told. And because you helped your sister to fly, that's how we see all sisters fly. Because you helped your sisters to rise, that's how we see all sisters fly. What I have shared are examples of how creativity is a form of social justice, and coupled with criminal justice can equal reclaiming total freedom to live a safe and just and equal life for women and girls. As someone who hadn't studied art and only embarked on an artistic journey with Advance in 2018, my hope is that I have encouraged all present today to be creatively courageous or courageously creative, because surviving to thriving is the art of conscious and awareness, an awareness which can be used as direction for support staff so they can help survivors create the life that they want to live, by encouraging survivors to safely use their creative expression to thaw the numbing, erase the suicidal thoughts, and live beyond surviving, or as I'd like to say, let art be your becoming. Thank you for listening to me, a former advanced service user named Antonia/Amja of Amja Unabashedly, a creative hub where love, art, and inspiration empower. Thank you.
Okay, Nikki, follow that. It is actually my real pleasure to introduce Nikki Scordi. Nikki joined us as Chief Exec in 2017 and has really been at the helm of this ship as it sailed through many a stormy sea. COVID, the cost of living crisis, tremendous growth in terms of the number of women and children and young women that we now offer support to. She's led the charity into designing and delivering new services, innovative interventions for women facing multiple disadvantages, in addition to domestic abuse, including homelessness, mental health, and problematic, I can't even say that, substance abuse. To tell you more about our new strategy and to be courageously creative, Nikki Scordi.
Thanks for that, Antonia. And actually, Beryl, I've got written things down and I will say them, but I always go off script by saying, if anyone knows me, they know I get quite emotional, and I get emotional because there is such an amazing breadth of passion experience. I'm catching people's eyes, and incredible allyship, and not just sisterhood, but peoplehood. Is that a word? And none of us can do this alone, so thank you for coming tonight. I'm incredibly privileged to have been here for 6 years. So. My speech says good evening, everyone, so I'll say that. I will take you back to when I was 10 years old. I was told by my teacher at the time, and my teacher was my mother as well, that we're all born free and equal in dignity and rights. And I believed her. I was part of one of the group of young people who worked towards the UN Charter for Children's Rights. What she didn't tell me, and what I realized as I was growing up, is that for women and girls, every day they continue to fight for that right to be safe in their relationships, in their homes, in their families, and in their communities, for the right to be free and equal. We come with it, but we don't hold on to it for very long. And we know that because 1 in 4 girls born today will be a victim of domestic abuse in this country. 1 girl will die, or a woman will die every 3 days in this country. Many more will end their own lives because of domestic abuse. And many will be criminalized as a result of it. They are women and girls we all know, with aspirations, with dreams, and with so much potential that's completely lost. Advance was set up, as you heard, to respond to what women and girls really told us that they needed. And you've got actually a group of women here who took us through that journey. And women were really simple in saying they wanted safety and justice. Pretty basic stuff. And yet, we spent the last 3 years reviewing our strategy and thinking, where do we go from here? We consulted with most of you in this room, with many of our staff, our partners, policymakers, funders, commissioners. Thank you. We did hear what you said, and you said some pretty amazing things. You told us that Advance is innovative, solution-focused. You told us we're women-centered, we're holistic, committed, experts, we amplify, we're collaborative, we are challenging. I know who said that one in this room. We're influencing and we're changing makers. Yes, Ruth, you. We heard your asks as well of what we should focus on, and you were quite generous with your honest and challenging feedback. And you were very clear in your vision, and your vision is our vision. It is for a safe, just, and equal world. We added the word just because we really understand that our root, our heritage comes from a response not just in criminal justice, but in social justice, as Amja very clearly demonstrated and reminded us. Women survivors tell us very clearly what they want. They want very simple things. They want the abuse to stop and to be safe. They want the person who's perpetrating that abuse to be held to account and for the system to stand by them. And then they want to recover from that journey. They want to be empowered. And Amja did a beautiful job of describing. Amja came to Advance after the abuse had been over. And yet there was incredible aspiration of what she could and wanted to do with her life, and that not only Advance, but Women's Trust and so many of our partners came together to support that journey. We are incredibly honored by what she's demonstrated today, which is that it's not enough to survive. Women need to thrive. We need half of the population of this world to thrive. So our strategy is really rooted in 6 of our founding principles, and I'll just be told at the end of this if they were our founding ones, but we're still led by and for women. We're led by and for women because women are still marginalized and unequal in the society, and so for them to receive inclusive services, we need to have a specialist response. We are for young women and girls because, and I am always shocked to say this, you're twice as likely to be a survivor of domestic abuse if you're under 19 than if you're over 25, both in the family but also in their own relationships, which is shocking. You're not even 19 yet. And therefore we need a response that goes beyond young people to girls, because girls have different experiences because of the fact that they're girls. We need wraparound support, again, past the thriving, past the safety. It's not enough to reduce risk anymore. I don't think Advance was set up to just reduce risk. And we've reduced what we do sometimes down to that, and we can have many reasons why we do that, but it's not good enough. Justice for women, because we need to hold people, perpetrators to account. Justice for the women who are criminalized and who end up trapped in a revolving door, in and out of prison. Systems change because, again, we were set up right at the beginning to be part of a whole picture. We can't do this alone. None of you in this room can do it alone. We need each other, and we owe it to each other and every woman that we work together. And collaboration and partnership, therefore, because we don't have all the answers, because women need intersectional approaches, because women need more than just charities. So our theory of change is really simple. Women need resources based on their strengths, and they have many of them, and they need those resources targeting all of their needs, not just safety and risk. Women need to be influential and to center their voices and included in the social action, in representation, in decision making. It's not enough for us to talk for them. They can do so much more without us if we can be supportive. And again, we've demonstrated some of that today. And women need systems change, and we've talked about why that is. And that really goes influencing men and boys, many of the allies that are in this room, and thank you. We're privileged to have you walk with us. We need change in the community. We need change in professionals. Many of us are here today, in government bodies and in policies. And so our strategies is based on 4 principles and 4 aims. Women and children in our community have to have access to wraparound support. It is not enough to have crisis management, to spend £300 or £400 per woman. We can do that with long-term support in safe spaces, in women's centers, in our communities where women can come together and support each other. We need interventions that focus on their well-being and their mental health for the longer term, because domestic abuse damages and devastates lives, as does convictions in the criminal justice system. That goes well beyond the immediate crisis. We need early interventions for young women and girls that understand and are empowered and have the information so that they can make informed choices and access support. Young women tell us that they don't go to schools and they don't go to their parents as much as they go to each other. And so they're trying to navigate what, as adults, we have a hard time doing at the age of 11 and 12 and 13. And we need to respond to what they say they need, not the choices that we make. They're not going to find that just in the classroom. We need to focus, and we will focus back on as Beryl said, the second part of our acronym. I don't know if everyone knows ADVANCE is an acronym. So advocacy for the ADV-BID. It's a challenging way of doing an acronym, by the way, Beryl. And community education, the CE-BID. And so we look for that community education to become central to our vision and our mission. And we will be campaigning a lot more, and that came really clearly from all of you, and from our survivors, and from our staff, that we need to be louder and make impact quicker and a bigger impact than we have done so far in 25 years. We'll talk in a minute about the panel of the type of areas that survivors and our staff want us to focus on, and actually all of you. Again, back to supporting services for all of our survivors, not just in refuges, not accommodation-based. It is not good enough to have a statutory duty that says that unless you flee, you're not going to get support. We need to improve justice outcomes and hold perpetrators to account. I'm about to give you some horrendous statistics at the beginning of this. The inverted triangle really stays in my mind too, Beryl. Early interventions for young women and girls, empowering them to make choices, informed choices, and prevention through society change. We need change faster than we've been able to deliver so far. And so finally, the staff and the women that we work with every day, and I mean all of our partners, all of the women who are in so many parts of government, of policy, of commissioning. Many of you are here. You heard our 2 founders refer to the women that actually drove what became ADVANCE, the IDVA model, the coordinated community response. It was 2 officers sitting in the amazing local authority called Hammersmith. The mayor and previous deputy leader are here, and so many are, which is still our home after 25 years. And we really need to be thinking about how do we make a much more inclusive, diverse, anti-racist, anti-discriminatory environment, both internally and externally, because intersectional approach is absolutely necessary if we are to address the needs of women that are double disadvantaged and sometimes triple and quadruple. And we are really focused on valuing our volunteers. We don't, I think as a sector, we haven't involved women with previous experience as much as we need to, because it's been high risk, because it's traumatizing, but there's incredible power in those survivors, and we have so much to learn from them. Because in fact, if 1 in 4 of us are survivors of domestic abuse, then that's 1 in 4 in this room, 1 in 4 in our staff, probably more. As Amja said, that CEO that copes every day. So, as a final point, over the past 3 years, there's been greater awareness of women's lack of safety. Sadly, because of the pandemic, because of high-profile murders, such as Sarah Everett, Sabina Nessa, and so many others, because of the review into police culture, like the case review that's just came out. I think the public are finally joining us in asking for urgent action at a time when trust and confidence in our criminal justice system and wider society is probably at its lowest. Women and girls are asking that we do better to protect them, and so that they can trust the system and society once again. And it does require systemic and seismic change. It is not about a few rogue officers or a few rogue individuals. It's not good enough for all of us to keep saying that we don't have enough resources, that is too expensive, that is too difficult, that is too many, that is too big a problem. We spend way too long allowing for that to be the barriers to resolving this. So we must take effective action, and we need to deliver on our promise to every young woman and girl who is going to be born. A safe, just, and equal world. And that's it. Thank you. Thank you. So we've got the most incredible panel following this, way more interesting. And so I'll invite to join me up on the stage, on the front, a number of incredible women. I'll start by saying that I said I would talk about the inverted triangle, just so you know what that means. In 1996, there was a piece of work that was done at Fulham Police Station, and I believe there were 1,000 incidents reported. So for every 100 domestic abuse incidents, what the incredible team that spoke earlier found was that only 5 perpetrators were charged, 5%, 5 out of 100 incidents, and only 1 was convicted. Today, nationally, I'm really sorry to say that for every 100 incidents reported to the police today, fewer than 5 perpetrators are prosecuted, and 3 or 4 are convicted. So it's heartbreaking to stand here and celebrate 25 years of work and incredible change, and to hear that we haven't really made any progress when it comes to giving women the justice that they deserve. Since 2015, women have been coming forward to report domestic abuse because they believed when we said, we will protect you and there's nothing to be ashamed of. And so there's been an increase of almost 20% of reports. But prosecutions have dropped by almost 50%, 47% to be exact. The statistics are worse for women facing multiple barriers to safety, including ethnicity, sexuality, religion, immigration status. So we're joined today by 5 incredible women who've inspired me, certainly, and many of us in this room. They've been working in the sector for a lot longer than my 10 years, decades each, and I'm delighted to welcome them today. So Professor Susan Edwards, join the stage. I'll ask all of you to join. Harriet Wistrich, Sarbjit, Ganda, and Souad Talsi. Joined by Melissa Oldman, who is our Director of Services. Grab a chair, Melissa. Here you go, over here. There's one in the middle, Melissa, so it's okay. I'll stand. Yeah. I'll start with Susan. Professor Susan Edwards is a professor of law emeritus at University of Buckingham, where she was Dean of Law for 10 years and a non-practicing barrister. Susan has completed extensive research and written numerous books on domestic abuse, including one that's just come out last month. She's worked to improve justice outcomes for women for decades, including consulting for the Met First Domestic Violence Working Party in 1984. That's almost 40 years ago, I believe. She's consulted with Beryl, working to implement the Duluth model right at the beginning in 1997. So she's made full circle because she's just joined our board as a trustee of Advance. Harriet Wistrich probably doesn't need a huge introductions to me, but she is the founder and director of the Center of Women's Justice and a solicitor for over 25 years. She's a winner of many, many awards, including the Liberty Human Rights Lawyer of the Year award. She's acted in many high-profile cases around violence against women and girls on behalf of women who've challenged the police and the parole board, on behalf of women who've appealed murder convictions for killing abusive partners, some of the most challenging circumstances. And we're delighted to have Harriet share with us her experience today. So thank you for coming. Sarbjit, straight after Melissa. I'll leave Melissa at the end. Sarbjit is the founder and director. There's incredible founders and directors who've been doing this work for 25, 30, 40 years around on the panel, and Sarbjit is one of them. She founded Asian Women's Resource Center. She was right there at the founding, based in Brent, and is currently its director, CEO, and she's also a founding member of IMCAN. Sarbjit has over 20 years experience working to end violence against Black women, minoritized women, and girls, and we're delighted because AWRC are partners of Advance, delivering a number of services. She led on the first specialist health response in GP practices for Black and minoritized women, and now community housing settings. So thank you, Sarbjit, for coming today. And Souad, Talsi, MB, definitely founded Al Hasaniya 37 years ago, I believe. Al Hasaniya is a Moroccan women's center, and she's currently its CEO, back and forth. She's worked tirelessly, and literally tirelessly. She can tell you that she's flying here, there, and everywhere to support Arabic-speaking survivors and campaign for migrant women's rights in particular domestic abuse survivors affected by the migration status, which is still a real blight on how we're letting survivors down and those with no recourse to public funds. Al Hasaniya also works closely with Advance, has done for over a decade, longer than that, as part of our Angelou service and also our housing response and so many other services. So we're privileged to have you with us today. And last but not least, Melissa, who's been in the organization for, I can't count Melissa, but 2015. Melissa tells me every time I ask her that she started as a volunteer on the National Domestic Abuse Helpline over 20 years ago, there-ish. So she's come a long way, and she's now leading all of our services nationally for Advance, and knows a lot more and answers every question and tells me every time that I'm wrong, which is a brilliant thing to do and keeps me in check. But we're incredibly privileged and proud to be working with her still. So thank you for stepping up on the stage today. So I won't keep asking you questions, but I'll start with Susan, if that's okay, and then go around the room and maybe share with us some of your reflections of what is it that we're not succeeding in getting justice for survivors right at the beginning.
Well, thank you very much, and I really am privileged, to be here and to be part of Advance. And I'd like to start off with perhaps my first point of the evening, which is about data. Beryl, you talked about data, and actually you talked as well about data. So I want to go back to, if you like, my own journey with looking into domestic violence, as it was called then, domestic abuse, but to take us through these statistics again. So I'm going to refer to actually some of my notes. And just to start with saying my involvement, as you've already said, thank you, with domestic abuse started with researching with two divisions in the Met in the 1980s. And echoing exactly what you've said about statistics then, I can tell you, I won't say what the 2 police stations were because it's not that important. What is important is to say that over a 6-month period during the 80s, it was 1984-5, there were 773 cases initially crimed. Of those cases, there were 16 prosecutions, and the difference between 16 and 773 were no crimed. The police at that time were actually disposing, hiding particular cases that were crimed. Women had been thrown through windows, they'd been stabbed, they'd been punched, they'd been abused, but they all said, or most of them said, I don't want to give evidence, I'm terrified, I don't want to have to go to court. And the laissez-faire approach was very much the approach then, well, you know, we can't impose the criminal justice system upon you, and if you don't want to give evidence. So, and what happened, of course, over the years, the no criming was challenged by research, by organisations and people, and the police then started recording domestic abuse. And what we've got now is a situation, I think, which is, of course, rightly being criticised. We've got a situation where we find that the whole question of reporting and recording has increased exponentially. If I give you a sort of snapshot of that period, in 1984, there were 384 cases which were recorded by the police, sent up to the Home Office official statistics, which was called C3, or was it called G10? Perhaps Anthony Wills will remind me. Was it G10, Anthony, or was it C3? But anyway, point is that 384 for the whole Met were recorded. It made it impossible for domestic abuse charities, refugees to say, it's a problem, we need money, we need support. People would say, well, just look at the figures. There are 384 cases. What was happening is that police were no criming those other cases, they were disappearing from the system, and the 384 just represented the cases that went through to prosecution. Of course, actually, some of those dropped out, as we know, at the door of the court by pleadings of family, you know, mother-in-laws, etc., would say, please don't, and so on. So these 384, now what we see in the Met now today is 75,000 cases across the Met that have been recorded properly, and we see this exponential change. But what we're also seeing, as you said, is a great number of cases are actually dropping out of the system because the cases are not being prosecuted. So I think I'll pass it on to
Harriet, who maybe can talk a little bit about what is it that's stopping prosecutions, successful prosecutions, or indeed any prosecutions? Why are we getting worse?
Okay, I was just going to reflect on a few things that have come up, and then I'll move on to that. I just thought it was very interesting to hear more about the founding of Advance and the history and the mention of the Duluth model and my own journey into becoming a lawyer, which was through campaigning around women who were convicted of murder for killing their violent partners. And I worked on a case of a young woman called Emma Humphreys, who some of you will know, who killed her violent partner, Pimp, back in the 1980s, and she wrote to us to ask for assistance. And I was not a lawyer at that time, but I volunteered to help with her, and I learned so much, actually, and I think that's a theme that comes through, is we learn and we understand about violence against women from listening to those who've been at the very hard cutting edge of it. Through my network of friends mainly and fellow campaigners, I learnt about the Duluth model and the power and control wheel, and that was very enlightening, really, in helping me to understand the whole pattern and nature of domestic abuse. It's something that I've sort of, as I decided to become a lawyer and train to be a lawyer and work on other cases, it was something that really informed me about how to approach that. And more recently, I've founded the Centre for Women's Justice, which is a legal charity aimed at holding the state, criminal justice agencies, police, Crown Prosecution Service and so on accountable for around violence against women and girls. And I think what, when we look at the problems as lawyers, what we're constantly dealing with are the failures of the system, and trying to find ways to challenge those failures in relation to individuals' experiences, whether it's failures to protect, the kind of abysmal failure of the police to use the powers they've been given to protect women from domestic abuse, the failures to investigate, the failures to prosecute, and the failures of the court system to understand those experiences and the dynamics of male violence against women, and to deliver justice. And it's very close to my heart also that you look at an organisation doesn't just look at one side of the story. I mean, unfortunately, too many women are criminalised, and that when we demand change to address offenders, we need to recognise that unless those that operate in the criminal justice system understand what has led to this person being arrested, they will not, justice will not be delivered. And too much of the resources that go into investigating and prosecuting are completely unable to understand those dynamics. And what so often, for example, we see prosecutions that are resourced because they're easy wins. So women who have been coerced into offending, and it's they're banged to rights and they're going to go down. And what is the use of a criminal justice system that is not an intelligent criminal justice system? So that's kind of a sort of general theme that I would say in terms of the collapse in the prosecution rate. Well, I mean, I think your work in relation to domestic abuse courts is really, really important to have specialists. And I think the loss of resourcing of specialist units within policing, within prosecution, within the court system, and within probation is partly to do with what we've seen, as well as kind of creating cultures within those organisations, or allowing cultures within those organisations to become actually, as we've seen with the police, infected by the most horrific misogyny that we see in wider society, and giving power to, not recognising that some people are drawn to policing because it gives them power to abuse. So, we have to challenge that at every level. So I'm sorry if that's not quite answering your question, but
it does, and I think that's some of the work that you've done on sexual violence, for example, with the super complaint and so on, is really inspiring in terms of thinking from a perspective of domestic abuse. What can we do to change the dynamic and the conversation?
Yeah. I mean, from our point of view, what we do at the centre, I mean, we work very much in terms of partnership with frontline organisations. So we do a lot of work with organisations on the ground that are supporting survivors, and that feeds into our ability to identify where the systemic issues are, and to look at strategic legal challenges. So we did do a big legal case in which we challenged the abysmal under-prosecution of rape, and that was ultimately unsuccessful in court, but I think it was very powerful in really putting pressure on the Crown Prosecution Service to change its practices. Exactly. So although we didn't actually get a win in the court case, I think it really did and has galvanised change, and we're beginning to see a slight improvement of the prosecution of rape. And the police super complaint system, we've used that in relation to the lack of protective powers, the failure to use the powers that exist, and also in relation to police perpetrated abuse. So we're as a legal organisation, we're there to work with frontline organisations to help you think of ideas or ways to address, where we can't reach out and change, that we actually challenge and take on board and confront.
Thank you. Great. Sarbjit, may we come to you?
Yeah, good evening, everyone. Thank you very much to Advance for inviting us. I just wanted to say that, just thinking a little bit about our history, thinking about how organisations like the AWRC started. I mean, we started in the 1970s as a refuge and a resource centre, and we had nothing at that time except ourselves as activists and survivors that had a passion to actually set up and address violence against women and girls. And this kind of links into what we should be continuing to do. And we kind of campaigned for the basic rights of having a safe space for women to live free from abuse. And that was one of the basic forms of, rights that we should be affording to all women. And, our organisation also was committed to developing services based on self-help. I think that's really important. And we're kind of like losing some of those things, like women organising together, talking with one another, learning from one another, and creating these safe spaces and empowering women. I don't hear the word empowering used very often these days, but, I think it's important to go back to the fundamentals of why organisations were set up. And right from the times when we were set up, right to the present day, it's been a continual process of campaign to establish, to change, to establish services that would meet the needs of women, that we are supported both in emergency situations when they turn up to our doors, and also to meet some of their very longer term needs. You talked about counselling, therapeutic support, rebuilding their lives. Sometimes this has been helped by the government, and sometimes very hindered by local authorities, agencies and policies. It does feel that we've made some gains, but we are stepping back. And I think we need to be revisiting some of these fundamental principles in terms of trying to, look at what our core values and our principles are and why we support women. So I would offer that in the initial stage.
Sorry, it's about the tweet. Souad's getting interrupted.
Hello, good evening, everyone. Thank you so much. I don't know where to start, actually. Like so many, it is the passion that drove me to start Hasaniya Moroccan Women's Centre. Early years, coming to the country at the age of 12, I was drafted by my father as soon as I could speak 2 words in English to interpret for all the uncles I suddenly had in North Kensington. And so I joined the CAB in the 80s. And as I started working as a caseworker, I came across a number of Moroccan women, full-time workers in the hospitality industry, yet they had no control over their money. So every time I completed a form for family income support in those days, she didn't know how much she earned. So I would ask, well, why? Oh, we work at the same hotel and he picks up the package. So the wages were in a brown packets. Those who are over 60 will remember. And so I became incredibly involved, and thanks to my late father, he always told me that I was equal to my brother, which is something quite unusual in Arab families. I am privileged to have been given that upbringing. I'm also privileged to have come to this country that had given me the impetus and the wings, in a way, to fight. What I didn't know is the system here is just as bad. Hasaniya was born to support Moroccan women to access justice. And with so many terrible happenings in the Arab world since then, we've had so many women coming from the Arab world. So we've seen it all. We've seen all forms of abuse. And as one of my clients said, I survived the abuse, but I am a victim of the system here. Our system does not support all women. It's a big lie. Istanbul Convention supports women with a provision, Article 49. If you are a migrant woman with insecure immigration status, you have very little support. Try the websites that says if you have no recourse to public funds, you will be supported, and you will find that there is very little support. And so I find that even those who are articulate and educated at times cannot support themselves. And I bring you to a case that made the headlines last week. I'm trying to do the 4 minutes for 40 years. Bear with me. This is a British-born Moroccan who qualified as a doctor and was working at Brighton Hospital, Reem Alawi. You may have come across the article last year. Her father is a friend and a journalist, and I didn't know anything about the case until someone said to me, Reem has been attacked, an acid attack. Now, this is someone who's quite middle class, educated, part of the system, she knows. And so I rang the father and I said, what's happened? And he said, well, Reem has been attacked by her boyfriend. And he didn't say the boyfriend because we don't have boyfriend, we just get married. And she's literally wanting to kill herself, not because of the acid attack, but because of the justice system. He was given 8 years with a possibility of 5-year parole. So I said, that can't be right. Did they have a relationship? And there was a pause on the phone. I said, was he the boyfriend? It's okay, you can talk to me, tell me. And he said, yes, he was her boyfriend. They finished their relationship, but he did not accept it. So he decided to dress as a woman with a hijab, knocked at her door after her shift at the hospital, and just destroyed her life, basically, and the loss of one eye. And I sat there and I said, well, if this girl did not want to admit that he was her boyfriend, or the parents didn't want to speak about it, what are our professionals in the justice system doing? So I said, can you sign an authority or consent for me? I rang the police officer in charge. I said, this is a domestic violence case. Why didn't you bring the domestic violence issue into it? Oh, they didn't tell us. No, it's your job, my friend. You do it. So we started from scratch. Within 3 months, we were back in court. And eventually, to cut a long story short, it wasn't as easy as I'm putting it. He was back in court, and he was given 24 years. This is what drives us all here, is because we are passionate about what we do. It is certainly not the money. We cannot do our jobs without the resources. I don't have a comm person, I don't have a HR person, I don't even have the cleaner. I'm there at 7 o'clock in the morning. I'm the interim chief executive. Why? I don't want to be the chief executive. I've had double breast cancer, I'd like to rest, I'm 63, I have to do it. But I don't have the money to employ a chief executive. So when politicians, if some politicians are here, and they talk about resources being available, there are very little resources. We are expected to do more for less. Don't abuse our passion and our sisterly love and our compassion that we also are part of this society, that we should be treated equally, because there is no equality. Thank you.
Yes, Souad, you're very right. There is a big resourcing issue, definitely. And as everybody else was saying, thank you for all of the wonderful speakers. Yeah, we definitely need to have a systems change, but within it, we really need to resource it, because you can't just say it and not back it up, or nothing really happens. What we've seen, as Nikki was referencing before, is we've seen a decrease in trust and confidence across the criminal justice system. We've seen it from the Baroness Casey review, as you were mentioning before, Sarah Everard, in terms of the courts, where we have long delays before cases are going through, in terms of local authorities, where we're getting inconsistent, inadequate, and sometimes a complete lack of response. From there, we had, which many of you in the room were probably here in 2019, when we had another event at the Old Bailey. And in that event, I spoke about the issues that we're finding in terms of domestic abuse in the criminal justice system and different responses, and addressed models and tools that we could be using in terms of it. And when you think and you go back, and this is nearly 4 years now, wow, COVID was a long time, huh? And you compare it in the light of what everybody is saying, what we can see is we haven't moved forward enough. We haven't moved forward in terms of the ways that we've all been saying are really, really needed. Yes, you might say, okay, so then we had the pandemic. So of course the pandemic changed things. And then we also have the cost of living crisis. But the thing is, it hasn't stagnated despite those things. It's actually exacerbated. It's gotten a lot worse. We're now at the point where we have higher numbers of women reporting domestic abuse, which is great on one hand, which is definitely, what we're encouraging. But then, as Nikki was saying, the prosecutions are dropping. So what are we asking people to do? But it also isn't just in terms of somebody who comes through the criminal justice system, as you were so rightly saying, in terms of being a victim or a witness in terms of it. It's also on the whole entire criminal justice system. What we're finding is that 70% of the women who get conditional cautions from the police, they've experienced domestic abuse. And there's a big overlap there. Because when you experience domestic abuse, you experience trauma, and it impacts people in a variety of ways. I mean, we have women coming through our projects who their perpetrator was their partner, and they withheld the money, and they had children they needed to feed. So they went and they shoplifted. And they then found themselves part of the criminal justice system as a result, because they were trying to feed their children. As I was saying in 2019, we have systems, we have processes, we have ideas about and solutions, and we've tested some of them, for instance, in our different criminal justice IDVA projects that we've done with different partners. And so then, when you look at all of that, and then you look at it, and you look at the resourcing barriers that we found, we then find that different interventions get put in place, but the different interventions are not doing what it needs to do. We've had interventions from the police where they have then gone through and said, okay, we don't have enough resources, so we're going to focus on people who are at the highest risk of further domestic abuse. There's a whole huge plethora of other people, and as we all know in this room, risk is dynamic. It's covering such a tiny amount of people. We then have had other things such as specialist domestic abuse courts that we were referencing before. We've had funding for that's been cut. We don't have the number of specialists, and we don't have specialist domestic abuse prosecutors like we used to have. We're finding things like our criminal justice IDVA services, they're like a water tap. It goes on, we get funding, it comes off when we turn it, and so forth, and it keeps going back and forth. Meanwhile, all of this is going against a backdrop of, we all know that 24% of domestic abuse cases are getting reported, is what we're being told, right? And so what this amounts to is it amounts to a call every 30 seconds to the police. But is this the same amount of resources that the police are then dedicating in terms of handling and responding to this? It's not. Is this the amount of resources that we're getting in terms of the local authority? Because we know that they get even greater numbers if they look under the hood of the car of it. And that, again, is not what's happening. As I was saying before, we've talked before about solutions. We've shared them. But what we really need to do is we really need to overcome this resourcing barrier, and we really need to start implementing things in terms of it. We need to do that. We also need to monitor it. We also need to drive it forward, and we need to have strategic delivery groups who track it and do it, such as the London Blueprint for women involved in the criminal justice system. Because if what we really want to do, and as we've all said, is we really, really need a systems change approach, but to do it, we have to work collectively together. Because as we all know, actions speak a lot louder than words, and so we really need to start backing that up.
Thank you, Melissa. I think Susan wants to have 1 minute, and then I'll turn it over to you. So you've all got a minute or two to think about questions. You've heard enough from us.
Okay, you can time me, but I don't think I quite got into the swing of it at the beginning. So I started talking about the data problem, and the message is little has changed. So what can be done? In 1996, there was a case of a woman who was beaten unrecognizably, as many women are, by her boyfriend. And in that case, she was too terrified when the case got to court, so she refused to give evidence. She was then proceeded against for perverting the course of justice. This is not the one I think that others are thinking about. This is the 1996 one. What was important about that case was that it went on to the Court of Appeal to appeal her sentence, and the judges said, why didn't you use the hearsay provision in the Criminal Justice Act, which was then 1988 Act? Of course, we know of the A case in 2012, well, when yet again, a woman who was frightened to give evidence and for fear was reluctant to give evidence, was prosecuted again for perverting the course of justice and was sent to prison, and she appealed the conviction, and her conviction was upheld, although the sentence of imprisonment was quashed. So I think what I wanted to continue to say is what can be done? Well, what can be done is what the judges said in 1996, what can be done, which was so many years ago, which was use the hearsay provisions. So if there's anybody here, please, prosecutors, please look at section 1163, whatever it is, 1162C of the Criminal Justice Act 2003, and use the hearsay provision. So when women are terrified and they withdraw, they look as if they're going to withdraw, or they won't give evidence, use what statement she has given to the police. Why is it that, as I started, that we still seem to be where we were? So in fact, that was going to be my second point, and you've allowed me to have the time to just address that, because I think that's important. We do, as one or two other speakers have said, we do have the provisions in place. We've got the provisions there. I'm just mystified why they're not being used. And we could increase prosecutions, we could protect women, we have special measures provisions, we can use section 28 of whatever act it is. I think section 28, anybody? Yes, anyway, the whole pre-recorded interviews where women are fearful and vulnerable. And the message is that women are fearful to go to court. They always will be fearful under all kinds of pressures, not just fear of further abuse, but family pressures, all kinds of pressures. That will never change. And I think that's why the statistics that we are berating the fact that police are recording more, but we've got the problem that that gap is widening. It's because the no crime figures that would have been disposed with so that the police could look as if they were clearing up crime because they had fewer to clear up. So we'll always have that problem.
Yep.
But I think if we could use measures within the courts, we could assist prosecutions. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you. No, that was really important. Thank you to all of you. I'm going to be another hard chair, in fact, and give the audience a chance. And if they haven't asked the question, then please have a final statement. So anyone who wants to start, kick us off with any questions for our panel. Okay, I'll take one there and then followed by...
So this is a question that starts off in the statements ago. So I'm here on behalf of, I'd say, women who fall through the cracks, victims who don't necessarily get the support when they need it. So I've experienced advanced women's and you name that influence. And I had to start my own thing, because one thing I realised is two things. I've sat here and I've listened to a lot of women speak, only a few of them were actually survivors. So only I can express it, only I can share my story, and only come up in this. It's hard for someone who hasn't walked in my shoes to understand what I need and to kind of speak on my behalf, if that makes sense. And also, I work in this skin. This skin involves a lot of other things that make my experience of domestic violence a lot harder. Also, I think people forget that domestic violence is a long-term thing. So I have a child with my perpetrator. I'm 28 years old. My journey started at 21. And a lot of the journey I had to go alone. So then I had to ask myself, how many other women had to go this journey alone like me? So my question here is, what about those who fall through the cracks? What about those people who do ask for help, but it doesn't come until later on? Or what about those people who did have help? I'm a survivor, but it doesn't go away. I still get triggered. I still get traumatized. What about us?
Shall I pass that on to Sarbjit?
That was the point I was just going to make, because I didn't really talk about the issue of intersectionality. When you talk about a woman who looks like yourself, we're all very different. I think it's really important that we look at things in an intersectional way. We look at how multiple oppressions, shape our lived experience. I think in the early conversation, we were saying that, it's not an equal playing field, because I know that you and I are going to not have the equal investment. We're not going to get the same services because of police misogyny, racism, casteism, all of that. So we understand that those are barriers. I mean, I think one of the important things is also the importance of led by and for organisations. And I think we were part of setting up Ivimgan many, many years ago, and now they're an umbrella organisation. I think that it's really important that, that we work with led by and for organisations that understand those oppressions, that can educate the police, that can educate the criminal justice system, because time and time again, I was thinking about Bieber and Nicole Smallman, where that case showed up so much levels of racism, and this happened not very long ago. So that's what the backdrop that we're working with. And I think we need the voices of yourself. We need you to tell us, be at the centre of everything that we're doing.
And following on from that, also, I very much agree that it isn't something that one night, you wake up and it suddenly disappears. And that is a completely different response that's needed. And it isn't something that you have a project that's for a very short period of time, a matter of months. I mean, come on, who does that actually? It scratches the surface, and you need something that digs in much deeper, and you need a much wider variety and array of things, because different people are going to be at different positions and they need different things. And that's where part of, that's actually, and it looks like I need to pass this on, that's also part of where having wider services that cover more, some of the things like the group work and various other stuff, and having it at different junctions and different ventures, as well as that's why it's so important to do stuff in partnership as well. Different organizations have different specialisms, and we need to protect and work together in terms of it, because together is what we all need to be doing something.
Absolutely. I think in our case we have what we call the 3 E's: educate, engage, and empower. And when a woman comes to us with domestic violence, we don't deal with the violence and send her away. She then goes on to see someone with housing specialism. We teach her English if she's not, get her to school to learn. And one of our domestic violence survivors has just completed her master's in business. And so we go with them for at least, I think, 3 years in our center, because we have about 8 different projects from within. And so it's one step after the other. And it's not just a triage system where we deal with the violence and goodbye. It's all the way until she is able to become a volunteer, in fact, or support another person. And I think that's really important. And of course, we can't do it on our own if it wasn't for the support and collaboration of organizations such as Advance. So that kind of unity, if you like, or solidarity. Having said that, there will always be people falling on the cracks. We will never reach perfection, unfortunately.
It very much reminds me of actually the approach of South All Black Sisters and what Pragna Patel said about the difficulty presenting ethnic minority women who will have to report to a largely white police force, who will then start policing, use it as an occasion to police that community. And her work, and Pragna actually has contributed an excellent chapter on migrant women and the difficulties they have in terms of finances in a book that's just come out on the Domestic Abuse Act. I also wanted just to say something when Souad said, you talked about Arab women generally. I take your point, but I think what we've got to look at within the police force is questions of racism and also other organisations, and the way in which actually Arab, for example, is not a homogenised group. It's a variable group. And I think there's a tendency, if we're talking about Turkish women or Irish women or whatever constituency we might be talking about, to see there being just one kind of Arab woman. I speak with passion about that, because actually I'm married to an Arab man, which of course riles me, makes me very, very angry, because there is no such thing as one. And it's a question of educating agencies. There are lots of, I deal a lot with family law, and when we're looking at families are multicultural within the family. There's no one model, and I think we have to challenge that and encourage agencies themselves to be challenging those rather fixed representations of ethnic minority groupings, as if they're sealed, hermetically sealed. But to go to your question, perhaps there's somebody here that could address the agencies.
So this is the issue around what people
About
call
mental
dual diagnosis, right? It's not a mental health issue, it's a substance use issue. It's not a substance use issue, it's a mental health issue, and therefore, yeah, women get no. Mm-hmm. Back to falling through the cracks again.
I think when we're looking at women who are criminalised, that it's so often those that have multiple oppressions. I mean, Emma Humphreys was was exploited on the streets selling sex, and when she eventually came to be prosecuted, I mean, she had many different sorts of experiences of violence, but when she came to be prosecuted, the trigger for her stabbing her boyfriend was yet another threat of rape. But talking about being sexually violated when all the time you are apparently having sex with lots of men commercially, was something that she couldn't find a way really to articulate that experience in front of a court, and so she remained silent, which was why she was convicted. And I mean that's an example. But I mean, mental health issues and disability are kind of critical issues as well, of course, of as the issues of black and minoritized women that we've heard about, that all those different things. But I mean, it's different. I mean, no experiences really seem to get properly reflected in the criminal justice system. Even somebody who, like Sally Challen, was from a wealthy middle class family in Surrey. Her experience. Why, if you were so comfortable, why didn't you just leave him? Why did you stay in the relationship? So they'll find any way really to pathologise and criminalise women, basically, unfortunately.
I'm desperate to get you to ask more questions, but at the same time we've overrun, so my chair is saying, no more, Nikki. So can we pick up those questions afterwards, and maybe I can ask there'll be drinks, so please ask your questions at the drinks if that's okay. And I'm really sorry I'm wrapping it up so quickly. It's been a fantastic discussion, and I know we can go on for hours. Thanks, Christine, and thank you, everyone.
Thank you. I don't know if you want to take your seats again. Before you all get up and leave, we do have our second creative, wonderful person who is going to share with us some of the work that she has undertaken with some of the survivors at Advance. We have Shareefa. She's an award-winning spoken word poet, and will see us out before we go and have some drinks. So, Shareefa.
Hey everyone, sorry, I'm just going to adjust this microphone. Thank you so much, Advance, for having me. I just want to keep it quite brief because I'm aware we've gone over time. Can I take this off? Yeah, so I did a project for Advance just before the lockdown, which was a 6 weeks project. I worked with a group of women, some of them over 40, and there were women that were slightly reluctant first because they've never done any sort of creative writing, poetry, and all the rest of it. And what I found is that as we went on, they began to learn to be able to express themselves. One of the women who'd been in prison as well, she turned around to say, she'd never actually been able to express herself, and this is why a lot of the reasons as to what had occurred in her life where she felt she'd let herself down. And one thing that I just want to say is in regards to the arts, creativity, poetry, whatever element it is in performing arts is really important, and I just feel like people need to continue to support that, because I feel like someone like myself, I go in to do workshops, whether it's with Advance or at immigration detention centres, prisons, youth clubs, whatever it is, but the work always discontinues. You build a connection, you get the people to start to express themselves, and then it's like, okay, bye, and then you just continue. And I feel like that needs to be invested in because it's the safe space. People are only just getting a grasp of certain things. Like the woman said to me, she goes, this is the first time I've been able to express myself. And for me, it definitely was one of the most rewarding projects that I've worked on. And I've done a lot of different projects. So I just feel like that continuation of support is necessary for people like myself to not just go in one-off, whoever it is that we're working with, that's from marginalised communities or people that are criminalised. And at the same time, just the reality of creativity, poetry, and all the rest of it being ways in which people learn to self-regulate, like regulate their own emotions, whatever it is. A lot of people come from dysfunctional backgrounds, whether it's like the homes that they came from, and I just feel like people really need that support. And there's an old African proverb that says, until the lion learns to tell its own tales, tales of the hunt will always glorify the hunter. And I just feel it's really important for women to be able to have their own voice. Like myself, my journey of poetry was on the basis of being frustrated that men are speaking over me or not speaking on certain things. So again, that is, I could be somebody that could be in prison at one point in my life. I don't know. And I'm saying at the same time, poetry, creativity keeps myself in a place of emotional regulation. So this is a poem that I wrote for Advance. Frowned upon women, pushed to the margins of society, criminalized women, women perceived under the harsh glares of judgment, forgotten women, women who deserve another chance, women who found their safe space to face themselves, to grow, to engage, create, women learning to express themselves, could never express her emotions. Now she's writing poems and empowering other women, women willing to grow, women showing up for themselves, women with hard knock life stories that won't define them, women with chapters still waiting to be written, women with life pages that shouldn't yet be bookmarked, inspiring women, women who felt pain, uplifting other women, women everyone could learn so much from if they sat down with them for a moment. Women encouraging each other. Women supporting each other to not give up on themselves. Women given new eyes to recognize their own strengths. Women given tools to channel their energy in ways good for their health. Women learning to love and trust themselves. Women growing at speeds everyone can see. Women willing to learn more to heal themselves. Women moving mountains when they truly know their power. Women learning how their cycles are connected to the moon. Women doing valuable work. Women who've stood back up no matter how lives tried to knock them down. Women learning to value their lives. Women recovering from trauma, but still smiling. Women who now believe in holistic healing. Women allowed to be vulnerable. Women seeing their lives through healthier eyes. Women not judged for the crimes they have committed and the sentences they have paid. Mothers with children, women seeking refuge, women who face obstacles but are overcoming, women who persevere with persistence, women who are important, women holding on to hope for a better life. Thank you. If people standing outside, if you want to come inside as well, feel free to make yourself against this wall if you want as well. So a lot of the work that I do is actually doing advocacy work for people and communities, whether it's like to do with police killings and a lot of the conversations that's happened today. Supporting people to advocate for themselves using poetry is really important too. So this next piece I actually want to share with you is work that I did for the Level Up campaign. I'm not sure if many of you are aware of Level Up, but this was a project that I approached them with when I heard a lot about pregnant women that were losing their babies in prison. So this was a collation of academics and midwives' research, like Dr. Laura Abbott, which I wrote. Your Honour, I demand an end to sentencing pregnant women to prison. Prisons will never be a safe space for pregnant women. Too many locked doors to exit in an emergency. 2 neglected mothers gave birth alone in their cells since 2019. Both babies died in Her Majesty's prisons. An 18-year-old mother in HMP Brunsfield cried out for help in labour, ignored all night. She gave birth alone, terrified, chewed apart her own umbilical cord, wrapped her baby in a towel. Her daughter was already dead. Engulfed in grief, no support received. Prison officers who ignored her calls were given counselling instead. Louise in HMP Style was in excruciating pain, thought she was going to die. She begged guards for an ambulance, was sent back to her cell. She had a breech birth on the toilet. Her daughter was premature, no prison staff offered CPR. Was too late when the ambulance came. Rest in peace, baby Brooke. Your Honour, 1/3 of women are imprisoned for a first-time offence. Mothers sentenced for stealing formula milk. Nadine sold less than £14 of food after probation neglected her benefits. A day after being in prison, she miscarried in her cell. HMP Peterborough made her clean up her fetus and scrub the blood herself. Over 60% of women in prisons are victims of domestic violence. Women exploited into crimes by abusive men. Half on remand for crimes they didn't commit. Women miscarry in prison months before being acquitted. A mother sentenced for tampering with an electricity meter. Did she really deserve to lose her baby? She warned prison officers she was spotting. Not her pleas for a midwife ignored. She bled alone in her cell for hours. It was too late. She had a miscarriage on the way to the hospital, dehumanized in handcuffs. Your Honour, women in prison are collateral damage. The ripple effect of unaffordable housing, poor women trying to feed their families, universal credit, benefits have slashes. 1 in 3 women leave prison without accommodation. Pregnant women deprived of adequate nutrition. Vitamin D and daylight for healthy pregnancies essential. The metal frame of prison beds uncomfortable as mothers get heavier. Refused duvets and pregnancy pillows, clutching onto thin blankets trying to find warmth. Women locked up half sanitary towels as breast pads. No maternity bras, no baby grows to welcome a newborn. No privacy given to a mother when asking for a health check. Asked to open her legs in front of prison guards who are men. Her mental health deteriorates. Your Honour, women are displaced 100 miles from their family. Traumatized when their baby is taken after birth. Could take years for her to get back her children. Almost impossible if she's black, Roma, or a traveller. In 2016, a mother committed suicide 5 days after her baby was taken. No compassion for postnatal depression. No rights to choose a birth partner and a place of birth. Scans attended with prison officers. Your Honour, mother and baby units aren't the answer. Consider the long-term impact of grief and trauma. Please give her a community order, access to women's centres, drug and alcohol treatment. to mental health and welfare support. Your Honour, these are my submissions. Stop sending pregnant women to prison. Thank you. And the last piece I'm going to share with you all is a bit more uplifting, because I'm sure not just myself, but a lot of people have shared a lot of heavy things today. This piece is Phoenix Rises from my poetry collection, Galaxy Walk. I've got some copies of me if anyone wants to grab a signed copy. So yeah. Maybe us writers, poets and rhymers are all just imaginative storytellers. Sometimes we live to tell our war stories and come from a place of healing, where we intend on writing and reciting to be our medicine. Then pain repeatedly choose to vividly relive. Let's let go together today. Let's climb out our boxes and watch from the angle of an eagle. We manifest our perspective, for every thought has power, every word has an energy. I'm going to take hold of the reins for what the future holds, for what energies and intentions I attract. Because the few that have left their energy inside my womb, with or without consent, their spirit and energy is trapped in the vessels in my body. But today, I summon these energies and what's that collide with my energy and set them free. Free. Fly away from me, my mind, body, and memory, for you are a weight I refuse to obsess over no more, a pain I refuse to revisit. I will shake you off like rain on a wet dog, place down the rug in front of the fire. I am for healing before my addiction of replaying and attracting more thunderstorms. I'm not the metal pole no more, standing in the street, waiting to be hit. I'm the phoenix that rises from the ashes. I'm the eagle that's standing to keep my mouth shut and overstand the power of words. I am strength for my sisters and love for my brothers who want to overstand. I'm learning my growl isn't enough resistance, so I be more gentle with my tone. Light on the end of my tongue to kill the dark disease around us we wallow in and recreate. My tongue's a paintbrush. I know it's venom too, but let's not glorify our darkness no more, over how mad we can get, over how many bones we're capable of breaking, over how many phone calls I'd have to make to hug my ego better if disrespected. I will leave you behind like I did when I got on that plane, the way I've left people behind I love, land, memories, and serenity. This is my mantra. Every time someone I let close fails to appreciate me or trespasses, their ego assuming some kind of authority, I will rise from the ashes and make a bonfire where I burn every encounter which attempted to make me shake myself, which attempted to drown me, which attempted to challenge me. I embrace growth and rise from the ashes, for I am a phoenix. I can only grow stronger, never weaker. I straighten my feathers. I take off. Thank you.
Thank you. Wow. Well, listen, this brings us to a close. There's clearly more to be done, much more to be done. We will be launching a significant campaign in the next few weeks, so please keep your ears and eyes open to that and be alive to it and join us. I just want to say thank you very much to our panelists, our wonderful speakers, Team Advance, most of whom have been lurking outside the door over there, for a fantastic organising job for this event. Thank you very much. And mostly to all of you for making the effort on this rainy day to come and join us and to listen to us and to share your experiences. Drinks are served. There's more to do. Let's do it.
Advance has been fighting for women's rights for 25 years. We've not seen enough progress, so we're planning new campaigns to speed up change.